Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Today's special guest is experienced field archaeologist Dr. David E. Graves. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Well, good day, everybody. My name is Dr. George Sparks, host of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. Today, my guest speaker is Dr. David Graves, and we're going to talk about Esarhaddon today. He mentioned something else that he wanted me to get out of the museum collection. I don't know exactly why, but he said fish hooks. Now, I know that he wasn't talking about contemporary fish hooks, but something a little bit more ancient. So these were excavated around the Sea of Galilee, and I'm going to show this to you right here so you can see these fish hooks. Let me see this one. Let's see. Okay, so these are around 2,000 years old. Did everybody see that all right? But pretty much. That one got away. The big one got away. So anyway, these were fish hooks from the Sea of Galilee, but I'm sure that Dr. Graves has something better for us than just the contemporary type of fish hooks that we're thinking about at the moment. Now, about Dr. Graves, he received his PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. He has been excavating in the Middle East or Near East for over 30 years and been at locations such as Shiloh, Tel El MacArthur, biblical candidate for Ai, also the Temple Mount Sifting Project, and Tel El Hammam in Jordan, a biblical candidate for Sodom. A number of books, over about 40 books. He's got 2 new ones out. I think they're totally academic coloring books, but I do recommend them. Great stuff. It's a sneaky way to get your kids to learn about the biblical narrative. All right. And it's all done through artifacts. So today, Dr. Graves is going to share with us Esarhaddon and something about the fish hook. Dr. Graves.
Morning, George.
How are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Good to be with you. Yes, we're going to do a little bit of exploring the relationship between Esarhaddon, the biblical text, and what it has to do with fish hooks, which is kind of intriguing. So we'll get started. I'll start my PowerPoint, and hopefully we can work through the mystery. Today we're going to be talking about Esarhaddon, subtitled it, Hooks Through Your Jaws. And we'll explain what that means in a moment. This is an image, of course, of a battle taking place. And the mountain behind us there in the picture is actually AI-generated Mount Ararat up in Turkey, because that's going to be the location and site of the battle that's taking place that's being pictured here. And the AI-generated Esarhaddon. The stelae on the left is not AI-generated. That is an actual stela, and we'll be talking about it in a moment. So he's in the Assyrian king, 681 to 669 BC. Close-up picture of him down there in the left corner. And the material is based on my book on the archaeology of biblical people. QR code will take you to that on Amazon for those that want to see the references and footnotes and do a bit more research. George also mentioned the biblical archaeology coloring books, and they are all based on archaeology, and great way to introduce your children to archaeology, have some coloring fun with them, and teach them about artifacts that relate to the Bible. It's kind of a unique coloring book. I've never seen anything out there like it. So great stocking stuffer for your children for Christmas. So now we're back to Esarhaddon. He is actually the son of Sennacherib. We talked about him last week. And we've been talking about the 6 Assyrian kings who are named in the Bible. So all of these folks are named in Scripture. I have the biblical references there to them. And there is where he is on the timeline of history, and it's between prophet of Isaiah and the prophet of Nahum. And I believe he's also mentioned in the book of Ezekiel. These are 4 artifacts that actually talk about and mention Esarhaddon in the secular text. You have the stele here on the left. We have the Esarhaddon prism that talks about the annals or his victories. We have the chronicle tablet, mentions his name, and then we also have the Esarhaddon tablet mentioning his name as well. So these are some of the artifacts. There's a number of them that mention him. These are the probably the more predominant ones. He is the son and successor of Sennacherib, as I mentioned, and Sennacherib bequeathed to him, left him golden bracelets, necklaces, and other valuables, 1.5 manas, 2.5 shekels in weight, which were stored up in the house of a certain Amok, and probably intended him to be his successor. In 681 BC, Esarhaddon was at the head of the Assyrian army fighting against Arameans of Ararat. That's up in the area of Van in Turkey. It's at the plain at the foot of Mount Ararat. I've been there. It's very flat in that area. It would be perfect for a battle. When Sennacherib was murdered by his sons, it was on the 20th of December, the month Tebet in their calendar. And for 42 days, the conspirators held the capital, but on the 2nd of January, they were compelled to flee to the Assyrian king. Esarhaddon met his brothers in the army of Ararat near Malataya on the 12th of April. The veterans of Assyria won the battle, and at the end of it, saluted Esarhaddon as king. And after the victory, Esarhaddon returned to Nineveh in Assyria, and on the 8th of May was crowned king. So that's sort of how he came to power, a battle and a coup, and he reigned for a few years. We know a lot about what happened from the stele. Esarhaddon returned after defeating the king at Memphis, and Taharka, his son, the prince, is shown in bondage on this stele. So that's who's being taken away captive here. It has the story in the cuneiform, and it's you can see the writing over top here. It's all over top of the clothing, over top of the image, and they didn't waste any space, took advantage of every little square inch. And their victory was the second battle from 671. The first was won at Taharka in 674. And this inscription, his name appears on many inscriptions. Here's some of them in the ancient Near Eastern texts, Pritchard's work that's very standard for all of the translations of all the inscriptions and such. And this one says, it's called the Succession Treaty, and it states the treaty which Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, concluded on behalf of Ashurbanipal, the great crown prince, Titi, designate of Assyria, and Shalmaneser, king prince, designate of Babylon. The stele of Esarhaddon depicts the Assyrian king here holding the rope of 2 captives attached to a ring through their lips. So here we have the picture of the rope coming down here, attached to their lips, and another coming down here, attached to their lips. And that's how they carried their captives prisoner. He didn't, it would hurt to run away and have your lip pulled and with a ring through it. Oh, people do that today, don't they? They put the rings to their nose, rings to their lips. And I have the question, why would you do that? Unless you're a captive. So, but each to their own. And in antiquity, this meant that you became a slave. The captives were under submission, are believed to be the sons of the Egyptian pharaoh Taharka and Baal the first, king of Tyre. Esarhaddon's sons are depicted on the side of the stele. I didn't show a photo of that, but perhaps I can find it and post it for the video. Today, the stele is displayed in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, and I was there and I've taken my own photograph of it. I've used a better, clearer one for this. Ezekiel also depicts the fate of Gog and the land of Magog. It says, and I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws. So the Bible even mentions it. And I will bring you out, and all your armies, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host, all of them with buckler and shield, wielding swords. So Ezekiel 34 speaks about this practice of putting hooks into their jaws. And it's like a fish hook. The prophet Amos warns the wealthy people of Israel during the 8th century with language that is reminiscent of the image on this stele as well. Amos says, the Lord God has sworn by his holiness that behold, the days are coming upon you when they will take you away with hooks even the last of you with fish hooks. So that's where we get this idea and mention of fish hooks we opened up our podcast with today. And here is one that was found, 6,000-year-old bronze fish hook found in Israel near Ashkelon. There's the link for the full description if you want to read about it in Science Magazine. So there we have the ancient Assyrian king Esarhaddon and the importance and significance of fish hooks. Do you have any questions, George?
Now I understand why you wanted the fish hook. And it is interesting that how what would be bondage and torment over 2,000 years ago is now style or fashion.
Exactly.
Tell me if I could just take this and put it in the lip here, would it make me sexy? I don't
Or maybe a slave.
Yeah, well, you can tell which way I was going. It'll be like this or like that.
Yes.
That's a good point. Exactly what happened to the captives and how in the biblical narrative it's actually displayed. And guess what? There are those rare occasions where archaeology does confirm even the most tragic of narratives in the biblical narrative.
And the smallest detail that gets mentioned in scripture and how we have it even depicted now on these stelae. There's some others with the Egyptians and how they carried theirs off, and they sort of put handcuffs on them. And
Right.
sometimes they tied their hands up above their head like this, and there are depictions of that.
Very interesting. And of course, these fish hooks that I had here, these smaller ones, these are actually, I don't know if the camera probably someplace a little lighter color. These are actually 2,000 years old. So the one that you had must have been a lot larger. And like you did give us a reference so we can look it up on the web and see the exact size.
Yes. Now, they speculated that these were quite a bit larger and that they were used to fish sharks or tuna. But I'm not sure. We're speculating at this point as to what kind of fish they caught. Or maybe these are the ones that they designed and made to carry off their captives. But as with everything in antiquity, you had multiple uses for many of the artifacts that we find. You may use a round stone, as a pounder to pound your grain on your mortar. But if you have a battle, you'd pick it up and use it as a sling stone. Right. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's either one or the other. It can be actually both.
Right. Well, the scriptural narrative did say, well, two things. Going back to the fish hook, you could put it through the lips, but also they'd hook it through their jaws.
Yes.
Up and around their jaws. So if that's the case, then I imagine the fish hook has to be quite larger than what I'm displaying right here. If that's, of course, if that's what's going on. Yeah.
The biblical text also specifically mentions that it's a fish hook.
Yes.
And
so I imagine there's different sizes.
And not just a hook through the jaw. So
right.
Some of the text. So again, when they say hook, they are referring to fish hook, and that gets mentioned. Although I didn't look up the Hebrew word there for it. Maybe the modern translators suggested that was a fish hook. That's a good question. That's something to explore a little bit there. I have these epiphanies once in a while when I'm thinking out loud.
You know what gets me? It's like, okay, by the time of the Assyrians, they did have iron, but we were talking about bronze fish hooks, not iron fish hooks.
Yeah. The one that I showed there was bronze.
It was bronze, yes.
But in the Iron Age, yes, they would certainly have used other metals too, because bronze was quite soft, but metal developed.
But I just think the consequences, if they're going to hook you through and they don't know anything about sanitation, and they probably don't care because they're taking people as captives. But you think that could easily cause a serious infection. So there's a lot of repercussions on, we think, oh, a fish hook through your lips or in your jaw, and the repercussions. And then, we read about iron and iron swords. And of course, iron can rust. But being cut by iron, especially if it has any rust on it at all, can cause what we say tetanus or lockjaw. And we don't really read in the biblical narrative really too much about the consequences of, okay, a new metal on the scene, a new metal being used as a weapon, and the consequences of that. Now, yeah, of course, injury or death in battle. But let's say that you survived or prolonged the wound. All right. The consequences of later might be lockjaw, but we don't even hear about that. You think we would?
Well, George,
Yeah.
they had a special kind of lockjaw. It's called hook jaw.
Oh, yeah. For this, yeah. And I know I went off the subject a little bit, but just, hey, if you could have your sudden epiphany, so can I, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think they had their tetanus shots.
That's what I'm saying. You think there would be some indication because we have more contemporary pictures of people that suffered from tetanus and how dramatic the final and painful the final end of that disease can be,
Yeah.
right? And you think there might have been some kind of indication of that in the ancient history, such as you've seen Esarhaddon, with a cord, and he's got the hook through people's lips. You think we might see consequences of being struck by iron. This is what happens if you're struck by iron. But what if you're accidentally cut? Let's say that you have a knife in your pairing lunch and you cut yourself with iron. Consequences of that. We really don't see that. But anyway, I know that's off subject, but it's kind of interesting. Another thing that the viewer can look for, even myself, really, to see if there's any kind of indications of that in any type of ancient source.
Well, this may be a bit of an aside, but I was doing research this week for myself. I've had a heart attack, and I was looking. There was a new medication that had been recommended, but I looked at the history of the medication, colchicine, and it was used 6,000 years ago by the Egyptians to deal with inflammation. So the ancients had all kinds of medicines that they were using to treat conditions that we treat today. And here we are back, I think it was 2 years ago that the FDA had approved it for heart conditions as well. Most of the time it's been used for gout, but the ancient Egyptians used this colchicine to treat inflammation in people. So we can learn a lot from the ancients, and they weren't as stupid as perhaps what we think they were. And they had experienced the same kinds of inflammation as we do, although I think we have improved it or have increased it with our intake of things we've introduced into our diet, such as sugar and what have you. But people are people, and they get sick. Even in antiquity, they knew what they could use to treat certain things.
Interesting, a short video today, but interesting one. But it's very interesting. I wonder where you were going by asking if I had some fishhooks laying around. Yeah, of course. Doesn't everybody have 2,000-year-old fishhooks laying around there in a room somewhere? Sure, David.
I thought you might have one on your shelf there somewhere.
Yeah, there they are, right there.
Good, kind of
Interesting
interesting.
podcast.
I find it a fascinating segue when you can link up ancient texts with biblical texts and learn something that probably most people didn't know. And that's how captives were carried away with the use of fish hooks.
What was the when they attacked? I'm going a little off a subject also, but the Battle of Lachish they have is in the British Museum.
Yes.
The Assyrian relief of what they did with captives.
Yep.
Getting led away with the fishhook might be the easiest way, right?
Yes.
Because let's say that if your city was being sieged, that takes a while. So you might be suffering from starvation by the time it's over. And
Yeah.
if you try to flee, we've seen the consequences of trying to flee a city in this Assyrian relief, which is pretty gory.
Yeah, pretty graphic. Yeah.
Yeah.
With their head put on a spear, a post, and flailed alive, skinned alive.
In the live, and actually shows them.
Yeah, not pretty. So
yeah, people being impaled. So just indications of the brutality of war in the biblical time period. And even though you might think like the fish hook through the jaw or the lip, but also the consequences of trying to flee. The ones that got the fish hook might be the lucky ones. Think
Yes,
about that.
it's true.
And yeah, it's a sometimes a tragic thing, but the truth of the battles that were fought that we read about so briefly in the biblical narrative and then overlook it. And then
Yeah,
we just go right to the point of where the people are later restored to the land. We call those leaving is called the diaspora. And then when they return, we think like, oh, they returned. But then we don't see the suffering uh, that that was going on before that, and when they were captives, and when they were in, like scattered. Sometimes the Assyrians would scatter people. They wouldn't return to the land, so to say. They would try to take another culture and resettle them. I know we're going off subject, but there's a lot going on when you just think about being led away.
yeah.
Well,
And
what led to that?
the cruelty of the Assyrians is mentioned in the biblical narrative. Or
Right.
Nahum speaks of it in graphic detail. And of course, now we have it in the Assyrian texts describing how they treated them in the reliefs British Museum.
Now, before we finish, this is going to be a short one. What book have you written that people could probably purchase that would complement this lecture today?
I deal with Esarhaddon, of course, in the Archaeology of Biblical People. But if you're looking for some background information, the cultural background of the Old Testament book deals with each book of the Old Testament, and it highlights some of the cultural features like this that would pop out. So that would be a good companion for you as you read the Old Testament texts. So I'd recommend that one, Cultural Background of the Old Testament.
Now, this was off subject for that one, but here's just one of your books right here so people can see. It's a decent size. All right. A lot of information.
Yes.
Biblical archaeology.
Yeah,
And then I can show the inside a little bit here if that's okay with you to uh,
sure.
here, look at now this is black and white. But if everybody can see,
They
yeah,
are available in full color as well.
right. But I know this is, showing you on my cheap camera on my laptop. But the thing is, even black and white is excellent documentation right here, because when I got it in front of me, it's not blurry whatsoever. It's a good illustration.
Oh yeah, they're all
And that's
sharp
just,
photographs.
yeah.
Many of them I took myself.
Hmm.
I did all the
Yeah,
my
got
own
a
graphics
map.
for all of the maps. Yeah, I did all those
Yeah, so here you
myself.
go. So
So
yes, so
they're well done and clear. Depending on a person's budget, they're priced at different prices
yeah, I don't think I paid too much for
for a
these
person's
things.
budget, if they want black and white, or for what purposes, if you want a reference, if you
Hmm.
want a copy for the coffee table, you might want the hardcover one if you want for reference. Most of them come in hardcover as well. So hardcover, black and white, and also in color. I think the hardcovers are all in color, so they are a little more pricey. And I don't control those prices. Um, Specifically, it's Amazon. They have to put their price in for printing and so forth. So, but they're available, and I have the cultural background of the New Testament as well. So
Right.
if I have an Old
So,
Testament one, I have a New Testament one. I've done both
right.
Testaments. I'm a generalist and interdisciplinary research scholar. So I've done my work in trying to bring everything to bear on the text and use different sciences, archaeology, history, exegesis, theology. I bring those all together. My
Right.
theology stuff combined with that is in the key themes of the Old Testament and key themes of the New Testament. So that material has a bit more theology in it if anyone wants to sort of go off in that direction and look at the what's called the proto-evangelium. If you want to take a look at what a covenant is or how a prophet works, key themes that I address and look at. I'm a theologian as well as an archaeologist.
That's a nice way of saying that, people. You're going to get both in his books. You're going to get to understand the biblical narrative along with the archaeology and how they complement each other in these books. So I got a stack of them myself. That's why I'm recommending them. Of course, you got your coloring books. that you just done too as well.
Well, exactly. That's something that came to me one day. I was thinking of my grandchildren and I thought, well, what could I do? I have a graphics design background. I thought, well, why not just do something in black and white for the children to do? So I created each of the plates for those artifacts and making them interesting with some animals and, sheep and birds and falcons and lions and things that children would enjoy. And they can learn, and even for homeschoolers, for those that are in the earlier grades. That's a good way, a good project for homeschoolers to introduce the youngins to archaeology and connect it with the biblical text. So they can start young, and it's been embraced by a lot of my archaeology friends with great enthusiasm, saying what a wonderful idea, and they were pretty excited about it. So I think there's a few of them are going to be showing up in some stockings this Christmas. And I know I look like Santa Claus, but
you could have my shirt right here, your white beard, and your book, and there you go.
So,
but
you're hearing
okay.
it, and I live up in Canada, so almost close to the North Pole.
Yeah, there you go. I did, was Santa North Pole or South Pole? I guess North Pole.
It's North Pole.
But anyway,
George. Well, we got off track a little bit today.
That's
but,
okay. Fun stuff.
I think it was a good segue.
Yeah, so people that are interested in, of course, the biblical narrative, but some of the more, you could say, graphical points, such as when the people of Judea were conquered by the Assyrians. What exactly happened? What did that mean? And there we have it. And in complement to the lectures, you could always purchase Dr. Graves' books. All right. So everybody, thanks for joining us. We are now like 151,000 subscribers. Thanks everybody for subscribing and making this a really good year for Bible Interacting, especially biblical archaeology from the ground down. Everybody have a great day. And Dr. Graves, you too. Thanks for joining us in your presentation.
You're welcome. Talk to you next week.